Hey guys, welcome here with another video teaching you how to draft analysis in Dota 2. Today we're going to be talking about how to identify whether you whether your victory came about because of the draft or because of the players. Now we've all been in many of those games when it looked like the draft was terrible and still someone carried your team in a 1 versus 5 situation and you won and you think, oh, it's because of the draft or whatever. Oh, it's because of the player. And sometimes it can be hard to tell whether you won or lost the game due to the draft or because of the players. And this can be very important when you're trying to figure out whether if you just won a game, you need to figure out whether you need to improve on the draft or whether it was fine and it was really the players that had the problem. Now, of course, every single Dota game is a combination of both. You can't. Every single Dota game, with no exception, is a combination of both skill, gameplay, and the draft. But today we're trying to isolate just the draft, and this exercise in this video will show you how to differentiate, how to distinguish whether it was because of the draft or the gameplay. Now, in this game, I haven't played in a few weeks since TI 5. And I heard there was a change log, but I haven't even read it. I went into this game and I figured, I'm just going to be in this game to learn about. I'm just going to be in this game to learn about the what changed in the change log. What meta is popular, what heroes are being used, what heroes aren't being used. That's why I took a back seat. I didn't go captain this game. I let the Marana captain. She was making all the decisions. I didn't say a single word in the drafting phase. And I didn't even suggest the lanes. I just started walking. I didn't, ask to buy a courier or anything like that. I just bought my items and went straight into the lane. I took a back seat, like I said, and I did this to learn about the current meta that was happening. And it's also a nice opportunity to show you guys how to distinguish between whether you won a game because of play skills or draft. Now, we did end up winning this game. Lina isn't actually anywhere near my best character, right? I barely play her, and especially not support Lina. I went bot lane. The Storm Spirit went mid. So overall skill wise, when I played Lina, especially support Lina, I'm very average with her. And this was good because I didn't want to play a hero that I would completely dominate with, because if we won while I was playing a hero I was good at, it wouldn't allow me to analyze the draft overall. Because when you're trying to analyze a draft, you have to if there's one good player or one really shit player, it won't let you analyze whether the draft is good or bad. You have to sort of assume or have to have that all other factors are equal. And the closest way to do that is to play at around the same skill as every other player. So that's why me playing Lina this game and going a stupid build like boots first, that was good because it made sure that I was more or less on equal terms with everyone else. There was no point me doing the very, playing like a 6k play or whatever, because that wouldn't let me analyze the draft. Now, the first part of analyzing your draft is analyze what's happening. Okay, Storm Spirit is a hero with he's pretty much terrible before level 6, right? He can't really do much, especially not escape. He has 0 escape spells before level 6. The fact that he was hanging around the rune when they had this many heroes, he saw them coming, right? But anyway, even if he didn't, the fact that he was hanging around the rune at that point, that was both a flaw of the hero and the draft, but it was more a flaw of the hero. So let's move on, because no matter what hero you are, you wouldn't be stupid enough to hang around the rune when 4 enemy heroes like that. Okay, let's move on. Now, when you're trying to analyze a draft, the very, very, very first thing you should look at is how well did my laning phase go? Yeah, I know that seems obvious, but if you're not dominating each and every one of your laning phases, then your draft isn't successful. Now hold on, you say, what if my lanes are sort of tying? Right, it's 4 versus 4. That's a tie. That's not too bad, right? Well, I'm going to tell you guys something. Unless your lane is winning, that's a failing draft. If your lane is, if any one of your lanes are tying, then or losing, then that's a failing draft. Your lane should be dominating, or at least doing much better than the enemy lanes. The enemy laner should be terrified of doing anything. Like this lane right here. Clock wasn't getting any farm and he died a couple times. So I guess you could say that's a semi-successful lane because he wasn't getting any farm. I mean, he was getting a bit because of Rocket Flare, and he was getting experience. So you could say, that's the fault of the Lina for not zoning him out. That's the fault of the Mirana, blah, blah, blah. The point is, this Lina, Lina isn't the best. Lina isn't the best in-lane harasser, especially for a Clockwork that's meant to have a stout shield. But I mean, Clock wasn't doing very well. I think he died a few times, but he was still getting experience and a tiny bit of gold. And that just goes to show you that even if it is Lina's fault, which is quite possible that it was Lina's fault that Clock wasn't getting zoned out enough, that doesn't matter because the blame should be on the drafter for not drafting a better lane. The drafter purposely chose a roaming Mirana, and Mirana did well actually. She roamed a lot, but if the point is to win the lanes, then she wasn't helping with that. Therefore, that's a fault of the draft. Now on this side, for example, Silencer was getting experience. He wasn't dying. I think he died once. He wasn't really getting much farm because he was constantly getting harassed by the Winter Wyvern and getting scared off occasionally by the Sand King. So in this case, we can take a look and say that, the Silencer wasn't exactly doing badly in his lane. He was slightly losing, so that's sort of slight strength of the Dire draft, but it's not a complete domination. And if you don't have a complete domination in all three of your lanes, then that's a failing draft. Look at this. Clock is getting farm. Clock is getting gold. Like I said, you can blame it on the players, but it's also a fault of the draft for picking one, a roaming Mirana, and picking two, a support, or even picking three, a carry that is completely countered by Clockwork. So that's a potential flaw of the draft. Like I said, Clock didn't do that well in this lane, but he was still getting experience, which is all he needed. So that's the first thing you need to look at. Are the lanes winning? Now, it's 8 minutes in. It's pretty much tied in kills on both sides. 6 versus 4. That's not a dominating side on either side. So, it was at this point in the game where I was realizing it. Our draft isn't that good if we're not dominating the lanes. The other side wasn't dominating either. So the drafts, in terms of how good they were pretty much even on both sides. And that's your first indication that the draft wasn't doing that well. The next indication is, of course, are the heroes doing their jobs well, right? Are the heroes doing what you pick them for? If they are, and it's helping you win because of it, then that's a successful draft. Now, I'm going to show you guys what I mean with this. Oh, and by the way, going back to that earlier point of winning the laning phase, that should also count for experience and gold. So if you can take a look, the gold varied. It doesn't shift horribly towards one side or the other, and neither does the experience, right? So that's another way you can tell that the laning phase isn't that successful, therefore your draft isn't that good. Both sides' draft weren't good. If they were, then 9 minutes, that's still early game, 9 minutes, you'd have one side completely dominating the other, which hasn't happened yet. Now, continuing on from before, if you have to make sure to realize that a draft is doing well. Yes, I know the Sand King didn't do that well, but to realize that a draft is doing well, you have to realize, you have to think, are the heroes doing the jobs that you pick them for? Right? Is Sand King pulling off great ultis? Is Spectre farming well? Is Puck getting an early blink and catching enemy heroes and silencing them off guard? Now, this actually did happen several times late game. Puck and Sand King were pulling off great ultis. but so they were doing their job. Clockwork was yeah. So Puck and Sanking were both pulling off great ultimates. They were catching the enemy team several times with their ultimates and getting a few kills and doing a lot of damage. So that's one indication that you can tell that the die is draft. At least they were doing their job. So the draft was at least semi-successful in terms of Puck and Sanking. Now, you have to look at each individual hero. Did each one of them do their job? Puck was doing his job, yes, he was blinking, using his skills, silencing. Sanking was doing his job, he was blinking, using ultimates. Spectre, Spectre wasn't farming that well. 30 minutes, he barely has any items. Um, that you can call that a fail of a draft, because if he was drafted well, they would have picked a hero that could have farmed on his own rather than a hero that would be ganked left and right by a roaming hero like Storm Spirit. So that you can tell is already as a failure of the draft. Clockwork, they picked Clockwork, obviously not for Mirana and obviously not for Storm Spirit. They picked Clockwork for 3 heroes: Lina, Silencer, and Sven. Now we all know that Clock is a fantastic Sven counter. This Clockwork, I didn't see him use his hook shot on Sven, which is really the main point of Clockwork. He meant to use a hook shot on Sven, and then either blade mail or force stuff yourself out to trap Sven, and then Sven is useless. That's the point of Clockwork, at least in this draft. Now I didn't see Clockwork do that very many times. He did ulti other people, other heroes, but when this sort of thing happens, when a player doesn't do what you picked him for, and in this case, what they picked him for was to trap and nullify Sven, who has no blink. Clock didn't do that, so that therefore, at this particular situation, you can say it's a fault of the player, not so much the draft. Now, I know what you're gonna say. Yes, they could have picked heroes which might have helped Clockwork achieve that end better, but the point of Clockwork is an initiator. He's meant to hookshot Sven in this case and keep him out of the fight. Sven can't do anything once he's trapped by Cogs. I guess he can attack a few times or whatever. So in terms of picking Clock, I would say that was a decent draft because they had the initiation and they had the follow-up initiation by Sanking, Puck and Winter Wyvern. But I think Clock in this case, it was the player's fault rather than the drafts. Looking at the other side, back to so here we have a lot of initiation, a lot of big team fight heroes. Was the enemy team pulling off? Oh, see, I mean, Clock messed that up. Like that shouldn't have happened. That's a player's fault. And Sven is pretty much dominating at this point. He's completely fed. Spec is not fed. I mean, she has decent items like that, but she's completely wrecked by Sven. Now, it's late game, right? You can already see that the Radiance draft, it beat the enemy Dyer's draft. And that's a big reason that we won. Okay, in terms of skill, I'm telling you guys, the Dyer made some mistakes, but the Radiant also made like a lot of mistakes on my own team. Silencer especially was particularly, jeez. And what you can see here is that the Sven is completely out farming Spectre. That is no mistake. Sven is just an all-round better early game hero and better farmer than Spectre. Sven has a stun. His stun helped kill Clockwork a few times. Sven has easier farming. Sven is more self-sufficient. Spectre, Sven is a lot harder to gank than Spectre. That's a flaw of the draft on the Dire side, because they picked the hero Spectre, which requires a lot of babysitting and a lot of time to farm, and they weren't able to give that to Spectre because the enemy team had a roaming Storm Spirit. And Storm Spirit is another huge counter to Clockwork. So is Mirana, by the way. Mirana and Storm Spirit both counter Clockwork. And that's another reason that we won. The enemy team didn't take a single tower. When it got to mid and late game, we were pretty much dominating them. You shouldn't really use towers as an indication of telling whether draft is good or bad. But in this case, um, they didn't really have any strong pusher heroes. We had Sven, that's about it. Um, but because they didn't get a single tower this game, I think we can safely say that in terms of draft, what happened was neither side was very good in terms of draft in the early phase. Like I showed before, the laning phase wasn't particularly way towards one side or the other. Mid game, it was still sort of back and forth. It was still very precarious for both sides. It was only around late game that the Radiant side started to pick up. And I'm telling you guys now that the reasons we started to pick up late game was the two reasons: Sven and Storm. Now, these Sven and Storm players weren't particularly good. I saw them; they were very average. When a player does well with a hero, and the player himself isn't very good, then you notice the draft's reason that you won rather than the player. If you guys have seen an anime called Arslan Senki, there's a quote in the anime that says that a true general has to pick a strategy that even the stupidest, lowest soldier can win with, or general can win with. And that's true in terms of DotA drafting as well. You have to pick a draft as if even completely terrible players are going to win. The Storm and Sven weren't terrible, but they were very average as well. Sven did his job. He was farming the neutrals. He stunned in the bottom lane when I pinged for him. Spectre unfortunately wasn't able to help with kills because Spectre can't help with kills with a hero. And Spectre wasn't able to farm as easily as Sven. And we racked by 36 minutes. The game went on for another 20 minutes because we were mucking around. But we racked by 36 minutes simply because we had the better roaming hero, Storm, and we had the hero Sven, which farms a lot easier than Spectre. Unfortunately, the game didn't go long enough for Spectre to be able to farm properly. You could say that that's a problem with the gameplay because this game was a bit iffy in terms of figuring it out. But we can still figure out some criticisms of the draft itself. And like I said before, there's two of the biggest criticisms in this game were the Mirana and the Storm, which completely counter the clockwork. And of course, Sven, which outfarms Spectre. Besides that, the way I was watching this game, because it was so back and forth, every other thing that happened in the game was because of the players rather than the draft. Unfortunately, there are some games where even the draft theoretically should win or has won in the past, the players are just going to be outplayed or make mistakes, and therefore you won't be able to tell. This is one of those games. And trust me, you guys, you're going to have to learn when you have to admit that a game that you can't tell whether you won because of the draft or because of the player's skill. It's really important. You can't just decide every single game. There are some games you're going to have to admit that. This is one of those games. I mean, like I said, there were some draft comments that we could make about this game. But there were also a lot of player mistakes. We saw that a lot of player mistakes on both sides, and the drafts were pretty much even, at least in the beginning. But later on, the draft sort of pushed out, the draft on the Radiant pushed out the draft of the Dire. Yeah, so that's it for today, guys. Just to summarize, a lot of the time you're going to have to admit that you won't be able to tell clear cut if you lost because of the draft or because of the gameplay. But the best thing to do is, of course, to say both. What could we have done better with the draft? What could we have done better with the gameplay? I don't think Silencer was a particularly good pick against this team, for example. Likewise, I think letting them pick Storm without that Storm was pretty much the last pick in this game, so I think the DotA should have banned Storm much earlier, considering they had a Clockwork and a Spectre. So it's good to analyze both things. Stay tuned in next time. I will upload video hopefully of me drafting next time and analyze that. So see ya.